How y'all doing, folks? Welcome to this edition of the Outdoors Bound podcast. I'm George Nolan. Thanks for being with us.
There she goes, Wayne. Woo! Go home, Big Mama.
Go home, Big Mama, indeed. That was the sound of a 9.5-pound largemouth bass being released at Smith Mountain Lake. That giant was caught by Charlie Davis last week. No word on if it was an F1 hybrid. Bass guides and Smith Mountain Lake veterans like Dwayne Lamb of Captain's Quarters, who are familiar with the F1 program, expect the lake to produce double-digit weight bass this year. The Roanoke River above Smith Mountain Lake is really turned on. Lots of smallmouth are getting caught from Niagara Dam all the way down to Hardy Ford. The big stripers also running up into that stretch. If you get down to the Rutroff Road access, you can see striped bass breaking, especially around sunrise and sunset. Now, swim bait, stick baits, and live bait going to take those fish. Also, wanted to let you know about an important study that's going to happen at SML. The Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources wants to know more about catch and release mortality rates in the summer. The results could change the way stripers are managed on the lake. You hook them, but what happens if you toss striped bass back at Smith Mountain Lake? Well, that depends on a lot of things, like the time of year, water temperature, and where the fish was hooked. In warmer months, the common thinking based on past research is that a lot of those released fish are going to die. They fight so hard and the lactic acid buildup, lack of oxygen, and warm water temps are just too much to overcome. That's why there's no size limit on stripers at SML between June 1st and October 31st.
You can't fight like that.
But maybe Smith Mountain Lake is different. That's what the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources wants to find out.
It'll answer many questions that the anglers have had.
That's DWR fisheries biologist Dan Wilson, and it's his job to manage the fisheries at Smith Mountain Lake. This summer, members of his team are going to catch striped bass, equip them with a radio tracking device, and then release and follow them to see if they die.
And it will help us a lot in management, trying to work through how people fish in the summer and what happens to what they catch in the summer. So it'll give us a lot of insight for better management in the future.
The thing about Smith Mountain Lake is it's different from a lot of other southern reservoirs. It's deeper, stays cooler, and is oxygenated deeper too. Now that could give stripers a fighting chance at survival they wouldn't have in other lakes. And depending on if the research confirms that, it could mean new regulations to improve the striper population and the fishery at SML.
We will wait to see what the results of the study tell us. And then if there's something that we need to do different in our management because of the additional information we have, we can do that.
Now that study's going to run through the summer. We should have a better idea of the catch and release mortality rate by this time next year. And that could have a huge impact on how the striper fishery at SML is managed. It could lead to new harvest and size regulations.
And then as you can see, the missile shape helps the head slide right on there.
That is the owner and president of Salem-based Missile Baits, John Cruz. Now, he's talking about two of the hottest techniques in bass fishing right now. We're talking mid-strolling and hover strolling. Both are used to target suspended fish. Trouble is, it's not always easy to rig. Now, Missile Baits is doing something about that by launching the company's new Hover Missile Jig Head. While it's made with bass in mind, you can also see applications for suspended walleyes and stripers, too. The spring walleye run is just about wrapped up on the New and the Stanton Rivers. DWR teams were able to harvest the eggs and milt needed for hatchery purposes. If you're like me, you're always looking for value on your fishing tackle purchases. Wired to Fish is out with its ratings of its best value rod and reel combos. Now, the Fishing Info website says the best value spinning combo is the Favorite Fishing Shaybird combo. It retails for around $85. The Lew's Mach 2 SLP Baitcaster was rated the best workhorse combo. It sells for $124. If catfish are your thing, Wired to Fish says the Ugly Stick GLX2 Baitcaster rig is the top catfish combo. It'll cost you around $59. On the other end of the spectrum, the website rates the Pfluger President combo as the best ultralight combo for the money. It sells for around $80. I have an update on a little bear cub that was separated from its mama 2 weeks ago during a wildfire in Wythe County. The baby bear is being treated by Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources biologists and the staff at the Wildlife Center of Virginia. I'm told the cub's doing just fine. The next step is to try to place it with a foster mom. I talked with DWR biologist Kathleen Black.
It is at the Wildlife Center of Virginia, where they've been caring for it around the clock, feeding it every couple of hours, just trying to keep an eye out for any lingering respiratory issues because of the potential for smoke inhalation. So they didn't find any major injuries, which was quite surprising given the extent of the fire. So he's doing quite well. So we have two different options. The first option, which we usually aim for, is to try and place them with a wild foster if possible. So we put collars out on female bears all over the state before they enter their dens. And then as we have orphan bears, we'll try and match them up. So with a bear that has similar aged cubs that's still in their den, we can kind of slip the cub in there. And they're surprisingly welcoming as long as it's in the den and they're similar size. Unfortunately, we're getting to the time of the year where a lot of our females have started coming out of the dens just because we had that warm spell. It's very difficult to get them to accept a cub once they've left the den. And so our other option is to keep them at the Wildlife Center of Virginia until they're old enough to survive on their own. And then we'll turn them back loose into the wild, ideally somewhere close to where they were initially picked up, in a place that's got plenty of food and water, just try and give them the best shot. So we actually have several yearling bears at the center that were orphan cubs last year that we weren't able to foster, and they're just getting ready to release them. So he'll be in that group next year if we're not able to line up a foster.
Thanks, Kathleen. We'll let you know what happens next with that bear cub. And we have an update on some baby foxes rescued from a flood last month. The little guys are being nursed back to health at the Southwest Virginia Wildlife Center in Roanoke County. They have finally opened their eyes. They are cute. Baby foxes are called kits. Now, here's something interesting about the feeding of those kits. When Wildlife Center staff bottle feed them, they wear fox masks. Why? Well, that's to make sure the babies don't get habituated to humans and will remain wild until they're released back into the wild. I also wanted to let you know about the very first Virginia Birding Classic. It's being put on by the Department of Wildlife Resources. Here's how it works. You register your team of 3 to 6 people by April 1st. Then, between April 15th and May 15th, your team hits the field or woods or wherever, as long as it's public land, and you identify as many bird species as possible in a consecutive 24-hour period. Now, it's a great way to learn about Virginia birds. Plus, the prizes are pretty cool. They could include special backpacks filled with gear or a DWR experience, like maybe going along with DWR biologists on a wildlife survey trip. Now, on the subject of birds, the findings of a recent study of ospreys done by William and Mary is very concerning. That's the sound one of the top predators on the Chesapeake Bay makes. That's the call of the osprey. But there are concerns about that raptor raised by a study done at William & Mary on Mobjack Bay in the Chesapeake.
Since about the early 2000s, we have seen a decline, and now we're at below 0.3 chicks per pair. And so we are actually now below what the population was producing during the height of the DDT era. And at these reproductive rates, the population is not sustainable.
That's William & Mary researcher Dr. Brian Watts. So what's going on Mobjack Bay? Watts says it's a matter of food for osprey chicks. While they eat a variety of fish, Atlantic menhaden have historically been one of their primary food sources.
Atlantic menhaden deliveries by males to nests has declined by over 80%. And so in response to that, what we're seeing is a higher rate of nest failures. What's happening is that the chicks are starving in the nests.
Which raises the question, where are the menhaden going? Watts believes it's localized over harvest. The Chesapeake is home to a controversial commercial fishery for menhaden. A company called Omega Protein, based in Reedville, uses a fleet of boats, technology, and spotter planes to harvest menhaden on an industrial scale. The fish are reduced to fish oil and fish meal and sold for a variety of uses. It's a fishery that the Chesapeake Bay Foundation is watching pretty closely.
Our concern has always been what's going on in the ecosystem with this very intense, very efficient fishery taking place, in the Virginia portion of Chesapeake Bay or just outside the Virginia portion of Chesapeake Bay.
Virginia is the only state on the Atlantic coast that allows reduction fishing in estuaries like the Chesapeake. While menhaden stocks are considered strong on a coast-wide basis, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation says research needs to be done to determine the specific local impact in the bay.
This is a fishery, when it comes to menhaden, especially the reduction fishery, but also the bait fishery, that has a very long history in Chesapeake Bay, but we know our ecosystem is changing, and we may need to be more proactive about how we manage this resource to ensure that it continues to basically fill all of its ecological roles.
Back to the osprey, Dr. Watts says his research is a wake-up call.
The Chesapeake Bay supports the largest osprey breeding population in the world, and it's just one of those iconic species that's interwoven into the fabric of our culture. Maybe it's a bellwether of other things that are going on, and maybe we should listen to what's going on currently.
Omega Proteins, the largest reduction fishery company on the Chesapeake, a company spokesman questioned the scope and methodology of the William and Mary study. We are less than a month away from spring gobbler season. In Virginia, the season opens April 13th. In West Virginia, it's April 15th. In North Carolina, youth season opens April 6th, while statewide general opens April 13th. And in Tennessee, April 13th is the opening day as well. Now, spring's also a good time to target brook trout. Brookies are native to Virginia, and if you want to find the best brook trout fishing in the Commonwealth, well, you're going to have to go up, as in up into the mountains. In the mountains of Virginia, you can find some beautiful ancient things, but you'll have to look underwater to see them. We're talking about the brook trout. Brook trout are relics of the last ice age, left behind when the glaciers receded. They are tiny, and they are gorgeous, brightly colored with spots and calico patterns. Brookies, as they're often called, are unique in the Commonwealth.
The brook trout is the only native salmonid to Virginia. Rainbow trout are native to the Pacific Northwest, and brown trout are from Europe. But they are naturalized in multiple streams across Virginia. But the brook trout is our native fish. It's also our state fish, by the way.
And we are blessed in this part of the country, Southwest Virginia and here in Giles, where we do have quite a few brook trout, especially up high on a lot of our creeks.
Brook trout are not giants by any means. They usually run 4 to 8 inches long. A big fish, maybe a foot. And you find them in what anglers like to refer to as small water. I'm talking about these narrow mountain streams. You got to go up to get to them. That's part of the charm, because you have to go to some of the most beautiful places in Virginia to find some of the most beautiful fish in Virginia.
You're going to spend your time getting into an area, so you got to spend the effort to get to the spot.
Wild brook trout are found in Virginia in our higher elevations, or where we have a lot of groundwater influence, spring water influence, cold waters.
They don't mind small water. They can survive in just like a teacup, basically, a little bit of water.
While they may not need a lot of water, what they do need is clean water. Pristine, cold, sediment-free, and with plenty of insects to eat. The problem is, through the years, we, people, have spread out and encroached more and more on the places brook trout call home. In the process, we wiped out some prime brookie water. But here's the good news. The VDWR says it might be possible to reverse that trend.
And so that's kind of what we focus on as an agency, working with private landowners and other partners on doing things to improve habitat in those watersheds to allow brook trout to recolonize those areas that they used to live.
A comeback story with a happy ending for Virginia state fish, the brook trout. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, it's just a really cool fish. It's probably arguably God's one of his best creations. It is absolutely gorgeous.
Thanks Steve Reeser and Alex McRickard of DWR and Sean Hash of Tangent Outfitters for help with that story.
Oh, look at that guy. That's a gorgeous fish.
Like I said, now's a good time to catch brook trout. The DWR has prime locations listed on its website. Alex McRickard is the DWR's Aquatics Education Coordinator. He's also an avid fly fisherman. He's going to share one of his favorite techniques for targeting brookies.
It's a fun time of the year to fish dry droppers. So I've got a 9-foot 4X leader on with a bushy wolf, gray wolf here, and I've got a beadhead hares here underneath. And doing the dry dropper technique really works well because it allows you to imitate some of the mayflies that are hatching this time of the year with that surface fly, but also that nymph underneath it really covers your subsurface feeding fish as well. It's important to remember that 90% of a trout's diet is subsurface, while we all love to fish dry flies and see the visual eat, it can be really productive to drop a nymph underneath your dry fly.
Thanks, Alex. The great thing about fishing for brook trout is that they are found in some of the most beautiful places in Virginia. Fortunately for us, we have a lot of those places to get away, put your mind at ease. And that brings us to this week's 30 Seconds of Solitude and the sounds of the confluence of the Maury and James River near Glasgow. Man, that is just beautiful. That's all we have time for this week, folks. Until next time, I'm George Noliff of WFXR's Outdoors Bound. Tight lines and good hunting, y'all.
You build the mountains in your dreams. You lead the world so you can breathe. Whoa. You walk on fields inside your mind. You cross the oceans and the skies. Whoa. It's like you found a better way. Don't fight them all. What they say, just turn